The views expressed and the opinions given by the individual host and their guests do not necessarily reflect those of Para-X, its affiliates, or its sponsors.
Step outside of your comfort zone. See the world with a whole new perspective. Join us and experience the unexplained on the Paranormal View.
Welcome, everybody, right here to the Paranormal View on the Paranormal Radio Network. I want to thank everybody for being with us tonight, those in the chat room and those listening from around the world. We appreciate each and every one of you. I notice we have people in the chat room, and we have a guest that's in the chat room. You can let us know what your name is or not. But we appreciate you being here anyway. Tonight, of course, Jeff is still not with us. Matter of fact, I believe he is traveling over to New England. And not England, but just New England, where his family's at. And hopefully it won't be too much longer. He'll be able to be with us again. We have, I don't have Barbara with me. Looks like she's in the chat room, but for some reason, she wasn't into Skype, so I don't know where she's at. If you can hear the show, please let me know how the sound is, and we will go from there. I may not even be on the air. I don't know. So let me know how things are if I am on the air. And I don't see anybody saying anything, so... she's on. Oh, she's on the ceiling. Oh, yeah, ceiling cat. That's where she's at. And the sound is good. Tonight we have with us a recurring guest who kind of like is almost a co-host, you might say, because he is on enough to do that. And tonight he is kind of like be one because I don't have anybody else right now with me. So, but we have Thomas Wertman with us.
Thank you, Henry. You know, I feel like Ed McMahon tonight with Johnny Carson. For those that know who Johnny Carson is.
Why, sure. Ed had to do a lot of the talking.
Well,
yeah.
he piped in every now and then, you know.
Yeah. And so... But we got some stuff to really talk about, and I'm sure that you've got a whole lot more information than what we had a few months ago, or a month ago, or a couple weeks ago, whatever it was.
Whatever it was. Actually, I think it was July.
Yeah, I think it was
last
too.
Time, yeah.
I think it was too.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, I already got a question in the chat room. Cat O wanted to know, did you storm Area 51?
You know, I want to let her know the reason I'm out of breath right now is because I have AFib. It's not because I tried to storm Area 51. No, I did not. I was not one of the, we'll probably get into a lot more tonight, but one of the, 100 people that showed up out of the expected 3 million.
Oh, I didn't even know anybody went out there.
Oh, yeah, there were some that showed up, and there's a couple interesting ones we'll talk about tonight, but no, I didn't make it. Matter of fact, just let you know, too, Henry, I turned 65 yesterday.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you. And that was the 20th, the same day as, you know, the Storm Area 51 event, and I kind of decided I wanted to live to be 66 and at least collect a year's worth of Social Security, so that's why I also said, forget it.
I heard that it went from storming Area 51 to having a rock concert or something out there. So
yeah, I think they thought better of it because what happened was there was I'll just say a young gentleman that was only about 20 years old. His name was Matty Roberts. He was on Facebook, had this Facebook thing where he kind of started this whole thing as a joke saying, hey, why don't we get a bunch of people together on September 20th at 3 a.m. in the morning and storm Area 51? and they were going to do what they called, if I pronounce this right, it's called the Naruto run, where they basically lean their chest down, arms behind their back, and they run as fast as they can. And it's one of these things based on like anime. And the theory is, okay, we outrun the bullets, you know? Right. Well, they thought, well, if they get enough people together, they can't, kill us all, basically, And the whole goal was to get into Area 51 and find out if there's really aliens at Area 51. But this thing started out as a joke. And I was following it from the beginning, and in a few days it seemed like you had 160,000 people signing on saying, hey, yeah, I'm going to go. I'll be there. Count me in. And you had someone saying, count me in, other ones saying, I'm interested, but I may not make it. Well, these numbers started, everybody started just piping in. And next thing you know, it's up to 2 million people signing up. And then once it crossed that 2 million plateau, Facebook kind of said, well, maybe it's not a good idea that we keep running this. And they pulled it down. And not only that, but this 20-year-old Matty Roberts, the FBI showed up at his, well, I shouldn't say really his house, his mother's house, because I believe he lives with his mother. And Mom basically says, hey, Maddie, come on downstairs. The FBI would like to talk to you. And they thought, it was kind of like some terrorist activity, and they wanted to make sure that he wasn't doing something along those lines. And they really just kind of found out he was just a kid on Facebook who just started this whole thing as a joke. But it kept perpetuating and kept growing. Well, then they had reservations like, wait a minute, what if people really do start showing up? This is not a good idea. So maybe we should change the whole nature of this event to more like a concert, like a rock concert, and basically have a party in the desert. Well, they flipped it over, and a couple of regions out there. One was called Hiko, it's a little small town of like 50 people maybe, outside of Area 51, little tiny community. Another one is Rachel, where this place is called the Little Alien, which is just basically a bar, an alien gift shop, and nothing else in the middle of the desert, about 40 miles, something like that, from maybe Area 51. Well, these communities kind of got involved through this Matty Roberts. He says, hey, why don't we take and put on a concert out here? Maybe invite some bands in, maybe some DJs playing electronic music, whatever. And let's kind of like make a music fest out of it. And the communities were kind of hesitant about it to begin with, but a couple of them jumped on board. And they said, okay, let's do it. And the way I understand it, the ones at the Little Alien actually started putting money out of their own pocket to help promote this thing. So here they are, they're getting equipment to kind of doze down the desert to make it flat for campgrounds. And they're realizing what it's going to take to put on a concert with only about 30 days preparation. Now picture that, Henry, 30 days prep to put on a concert. And they said, well, maybe we'll have 5,000 people show, maybe 10 or 25, 30,000 people show. They had no idea how many people were going to show. And then they started thinking about all the resources. Okay, at Rachel, we have the Little Alien. That's it. There's no food for like 40, 50 miles. The cell phone communication would go down almost immediately because if people started trying to get in, it's going to knock it out because so much demand. You've got other things out there like where are they going to get water from? There was like one payphone in the region. And something that a lot of people didn't anticipate, I don't think, was the fact that it may be 70 degrees in a desert during the day, but this time of year it can drop down to basically about freezing or close to freezing at nighttime.
At night, right.
So they're not going to be prepared for these changes of weather. And needless to say, everything else is going to pop up. I mean, are they going to be prepared to camp out? Are they also going to be prepared that there's actually snakes and scorpions in the desert?
Oh, yeah.
There's so many things like that. And it was just, you could see this as like a disaster waiting to happen. Not to mention, where are they going to go to the bathroom at?
Yes. I mean, they got one little place and no food. There ain't no McDonald's.
Yeah, and you can picture a sign up in the front of a little alien saying, "No public restrooms," you know.
Right. Somebody blow up the commode.
Right.
Yeah.
So here they are, leveling the ground. They're making arrangements to bring in porta pots. HECO actually contacted some, I guess, professional promoters to come in and set a stage up and get their event rolling. Rachel, the way I understand, was trying to do it pretty much themselves. So, I mean, here you got this community of like 90 people trying to get this whole thing rolling, not knowing what to expect whatsoever. Needless to say, just even security. I mean, you probably basically have like Barney and Andy out there, you know, from the Andy Griffith Show, patrolling the desert. So who's going to be running security? So they had to arrange for security. So it was just this disaster waiting to happen. And when it got like less than a week before the event, Matty Roberts, who was involved with him, said, "Wait a minute, this is not a good idea," and he backed out.
Wow.
And next thing you know, he's involved with promoting an event in Las Vegas the same day. So he says, you know, wait a minute, Las Vegas has bathrooms. Las Vegas has hotels. There's no problem finding a place to stay. Plenty of food. And also, the places will gladly take your money if you want to take and gamble it away. So they had an event going in Las Vegas at the event center. Well, as I kind of anticipated, it was a disaster waiting to happen. I found some great videos that showed, like, here's all these emergency squads, like half a dozen of them going up the road heading to Area 51 region, because they're coming from, like, Las Vegas as additional help. You've got law enforcement personnel coming in from other communities to help out, just in case they're needed. But you end up having, some of the numbers I saw was like at the one event, like at HECO, they said maybe 200 people showed for the concert that night, and maybe about 100 people went out to the gates in that region near Area 51. But the good thing is I was expecting almost the worst, like somebody get out of hand, get drunk, whatever, get high, and try to crash the gates at Area 51. Well, fortunately, that seems like that was minimal. That there's basically like one person got arrested, and one was actually like for public indecency. I think he was urinating in public. There was a couple. Oh, this is a great story. Couple individuals from the Netherlands that came in. They actually came over because they saw this whole thing on YouTube, and it wasn't during this event, but they came over like the week before. And I've got their names in front of me, and I had to read the names like 10 times, Henry. Thijs Ganzier and Govert Sweep. Now, this is their names. And it says they were taken into custody after they'd gone 3 miles into the restricted area. So they got in 3 miles into the area, and it really didn't help them because once they got in, security caught them. And they said, "Do you know where you are?" And they go, "Yes, we know where we are." "Well, didn't you see the signs?" "Oh, yeah, and we could read English, too." So they went by the signs that said, "No passing this area." You know, they went right by it. And it didn't help their case when they found, like, cameras and even a drone in their car. So their next interview, Henry, happened to be in the local jail.
Oh, my.
and they got arrested in Nye County, I believe it was, by the Nye County Sheriff's Office. They were the ones who arrested him. And I don't know if they got out, but they were supposedly were going to be heading back to the Netherlands on the 19th. But needless to say, they did get detained. I don't know how much their fine was. At one time, I think it was like $600, period, if you went past the line, no questions.
Right.
Don't pass go, don't collect $200, you just got fined $600.
Wow.
Yeah. But I mean, it was kind of funny. And then the Netherlands, some commissioner or something like that back in the Netherlands made a comment that we need to get our people out of jail so they don't rot in an American cell. Now, they're lucky it was America that this happened in, you know. Otherwise, their bones could have been rotting and bleaching dry in the desert.
Wow.
Trying to get into a secret base like that. But from everything I've read, the law enforcement out there was actually pretty laid back. Some of them were talking to the people who came up, kind of joking with them on there. Very down to earth. So they probably basically, I'm guessing they probably got told, hey, be very passive on this, you know, don't promote any aggression. And it seems like it was actually came out pretty well that way. But the one area at Hiko, after the bad turnout of only like 200 people, they canceled their event and the rest of the weekend because it was so poor.
Wow.
The one at the little Alien is going forward. It's a whole weekend event. But I don't know what their numbers are like, but they didn't seem super impressive. But who knows? Maybe if it keeps going, maybe in a few years they can keep drawing more numbers and turn it into something.
Yeah. I don't know if I'd want to, though, out there in the middle of nowhere with nothing.
Oh, believe me, I was out there at the little Alien once.
Oh, was you?
Yeah, I went out there. I went to Las Vegas, and I said, you know, I'm here. It's 90 miles away. I got a rental car. Hey, let's drive out and let's find out what's going on. And I drove out to the region, and one thing I wasn't expecting, but I realized very quickly it was an open cattle range. So you've got cows walking right across the middle of the road. And I did read a few reports where some individuals did have accidents.
Because they wasn't expecting that.
Exactly.
It's like open range, kind of.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's what it is.
Yeah.
At certain places, you see like little pipes across the roads to kind of prevent them from coming out of certain areas. But you realize it's open range. I found the mailbox that everybody notes as being close to Area 51, located that, and then went back the road, and I got good directions. I forget who told me, but they said you drive back this road X number of miles, watch your audiometer, track your mileage, and this is where you want to stop at because this is where the signs are going to be. And they're exactly right. You're going down this dirt road, dust cloud flying up behind you, so anybody out there can see the dust cloud like 10 miles away, that here you're coming. You get back this road, and the only thing I saw on the road was like evidence of a couple ranches out in that region. Also, you had an unmarked bus that would transport Area 51 employees in and out, that had basically the windows covered over. They just shoot right by it, dust all over the place. I only saw like one of those. And before I got back to the area where the signs were at restricting any progress past that point. And you are out in the middle of nowhere. And the day I was there, it was like 100 degrees. So I made sure I had plenty of water with me and stuff like that. Full tank of gas before I ever left to go out in that region.
Oh, yeah. I might even had some spare with me.
Oh yeah. Last thing I would do is get stranded out there. And I ran into some guy. I shouldn't say physically ran into him, but he was also stopped out there. And he says, yeah, I'm just kind of watching here and seeing what's going on. And we were watching the, as they call them, camo dudes, which is the private security. It's not military personnel. It's actually private security, setting up on a hill just watching us. So we're watching them. They're watching us. There's signs up to say no photography past this point, or at this point. So we're filming them as they're probably filming us. And I'm looking at them through binoculars. And we didn't really see anything going on other than just we got to say, hey, we were here by the entrance of the base. And I even understand that on some of the ones that went out there for this event, that even some like security personnel is coming out and almost like taking photographs with some of the individuals, you know?
Huh.
So that was pretty much down there. The day we were watching them, they didn't. And there was a great, tremendous YouTube video I found one time. There's a guy that goes out to that region all the time, or did. His name was Glenn Campbell, not the musician, but Glenn Campbell. He would take tours out there. He did that for a number of years. Well, he went out, I don't know, a year or two ago, something like that, and he snuck up beside the camo dude's SUV. And he's got this camera out filming it, and he walks right up beside the window, and he looks basically in the window at the guys. And all of a sudden, these guys almost jump out of their seat, like, what the heck? Who is this guy? and he goes running off through the desert, and they're trying to chase him. And we want your camera. No, you're not getting it. And he just keeps on going.
Well, why do they have, like, security guards instead of military?
You know, I don't know why they sent firemen out to basically personnel like that. I don't know. At one time it was like Wackenhut, I think, security. Unless it's just maybe, I don't know, maybe more cost effective or something like that. I have no idea.
Well, if it was that much of a security area, it seems to me and it's supposed to be military, so I don't know why they wouldn't be using military people for it.
Well, you do have a lot of surveillance equipment out there, though, too. As you drive through the road going back to that region, and once you get close to basically where all the signage is at, you'll see electronic surveillance devices all over the hills. You'll see like antennas where evidently it's like cameras monitoring the region, sending the camera signal back. Most likely they've got
ground vibration penetrating.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Ground vibration sensors. So they know that even before you get there, you're coming down the road. All that's out there, and that's most likely, that may be monitored by the government personnel. And they said even that at some of the areas, you don't even see the people outside. They're actually watching through the cameras. And once you get close enough, then they come out because they can see you on the cameras as you're coming down the roads.
Well, maybe they have the security people for a certain distance, maybe 5-6 miles or something, and then after that, it's military.
And it may be because they also use the sheriff's department.
Okay.
Individuals who have crossed that border on there, the sheriff is notified.
Oh.
And I found this great video of two little old ladies, of all things. They come down the road to Area 51, and they're talking to a couple young guys. And they go, where's that base at that the aliens are at? And the guy goes, hey, it's, you go down this dirt road X number of miles, but you can't go down there, lady, because it's, it's military region, And he goes, but we can take you down, by the gate and show you where that's at. But if you want to go back to the town, you got to turn around and go the other way. She goes, no, kind of take us down. So here they go driving down this dirt road, the dust cloud behind them, to the little old ladies behind them in the dust cloud. And they pull over, and next thing you know, the little old ladies just, they're gone. they're going for the gates, man. And I don't know how long it was after that. Next thing you know, here you see the sheriff's department cruiser flying by, going after them. And you can see two like little old dust clouds going down the road in the distance, one chasing the other one.
Wow.
Yeah. But they also have, in the region, there's a hill that you can get up onto and look down into the region, which I thought about doing one time. You have to kind of like take an SUV over to this hill. And then it would be a real challenge physically to get up for somebody my age. But once you're up on there, you're about 26 miles away from the base, and you look kind of down into it. But what they've done is, go ahead, Henry.
That's still a long way.
That's a long way, but a couple of the networks, like Discovery Channel or one of them, took some extremely high-definition surveillance equipment and carried it up the hill. And they knew that they were there, because next thing you know, here comes an unmarked helicopter flying over, and then here comes an F-15 doing some passes at low altitude over the region, kind of like letting them know, we know you're here.
Huh.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they still got footage, though, didn't they?
Oh, yeah, they got some footage. And you think about shooting from 20-some miles away, you're going to have potential like the heat rising up,
right?
Distortion, that. You're not going to see extreme details, but they were able to see like lights out in there moving around. You could see the base during the daytime, but I think they restrict maybe a number of things going on in the daytime just because it's visible by not only something from like those hills, but also by satellites passing over.
True, yes. And anybody could be taking those pictures.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. Anybody who's got a satellite above that region.
I'm sure a lot of the other countries has their satellites pass over ever so often.
Oh yeah, and it's amazing some of the details that they look for.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that kind of surprised me was like when they were developing the F-117 stealth, they would put it up on a pylon, and they would shoot like radar signals at it to see if they could detect it. Well, when they were doing it like in the daylight, the sun came down and made a shadow around where the 117 was at. Even though they took that down before dark, it heated the ground up enough that they were still able to make out the shape in infrared of the aircraft.
Wow.
So then they started doing things at night so it didn't, you didn't have the sun beating down on it and leaving that signature behind. But
right.
Who would have thought about something like that?
I'm pretty sure that a lot of these tech guys eventually, when they spot something, they start figuring stuff out like that.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. So. Well, at least nobody got shots trying to storm Area 51.
At least yet. The weekend's still young.
So if anybody has any questions, you can private chat them to H. Foister, and I will get those answered for you as quickly as I can. I have no idea where Barbara's at, so as soon as she gets in contact with me, I'll get her on here too, because I'm sure she's going to have a lot of questions. So, and I see Rebecca just come in, so welcome, Rebecca. All right. I've got some topics or questions, you might say. And the first one I had is, what is the latest news on any UFO sightings?
Well, the latest news that's coming out is, we've talked about the videos that came out from the naval pilots.
Right.
Off of the Nimitz and the Teddy Roosevelt. And for those that don't know, there was, in 2017, the Pentagon admitted to running a program where they were looking for basically unidentified aerial phenomena. They said, yeah, we spent a paltry sum of $12 million in running this program. And a gentleman who ran it, his name was Luis Elizondo. One of the focal points that came out from that was some videos popped up. And there were a lot of questions behind these videos. And when the videos came out, there were things posting like, these are from the DOD, Department of Defense. And the first two, one was labeled the gimbal video, and the other was labeled the non-gimbal video. And what the video showed, the non-gimbal one, was a fixed camera, a FLIR camera on a F-18 fighter. And the fighter was tracking an object, and it was zooming in, zooming out as far as the camera image goes. But you could see an object which didn't kind of match a configuration of a known aircraft. That was the first one. The second one came out called a gimbal video, which the camera actually rotated and was following, tracking the object. You could also see as the camera's tracking it, that it didn't have what appeared to be wings. It didn't have propulsion like a jet exhaust coming off like we're familiar with.
Right.
And it was making turns.
Like on a dime.
What's that, Henry?
Like on a dime.
Right. And, you see the videos come out, and the videos, they said it came from the DOD, but they were being promoted by a group called To the Stars Academy, which is operated by he's a rock performer, Tom DeLonge. He had a group called Blink 182, and now I think he's got another group called Angels and Aliens or something like that. He's got another group that he's with. Well, he got together a number of individuals who have backgrounds in science. He got a hold of Luis Elizondo, number one, who left the Pentagon. He also brought some other people who were in the Pentagon at one time or involved in government offices to come over to his side, basically. And the videos came out through his organization. Well, where the question marks are at, Henry, is how did these videos really get released? And when I met Elizondo the one time, he said, well, the videos were basically vetted. They were going through. They made sure they didn't have anything regarding national security problems with them, and they were released by the proper channels. Well, that doesn't appear to be the case now. What appears to be the case is the videos were reviewed for internal use of the government through government offices. So when they were put out, there was a form that was filled out that said they're designed for internal use only. Somehow they got released anyway. So they had the first two videos come out. Then there was a third video that came out. And the third video was also a FLIR video. That one was called the Go Fast video, where there was an object moving at apparent high speed that a FLIR camera was trying to lock onto and did. To supplement these videos, pilots have also come out and given their story. David Fravor was the one involved with the Nimitz carrier group in 2004. He was describing the objects. There was another pilot also off the coast of, it was like Virginia going down through Florida region and that area, who came out and said he was part of the Teddy Roosevelt carrier group going back to 2014, 2015. And one of the things that came out from the video is, I should say the later report, is they said the object went between two F-15 or F-18s going the opposite direction at high speed. And there was concern that there could be a collision. And that's where it's kind of intensified this whole thing now, that the pilots are concerned that what if they have a collision with these things because they don't know what they're tracking. Well, to come up to the newer part of the story, Henry, a couple days ago, a naval spokesman, Joe Gradisher, confirmed with CNN that, yes, these videos are government videos, number one. Number two, they do not know what they were tracking, period. As far as they're concerned, they're unidentified aerial phenomena. They have no idea what they looked at. And thinking back, Henry, how many times you ever heard the government say, we don't know what our pilots were tracking? They have no clue. So this is pretty much a first. Well, so go ahead, Henry.
I think there's so much getting out there that they can't keep totally ignoring it or lying about it or trying to make excuses. They have to end up saying something.
No, and they even Gradisher even came out and said, yeah, these videos basically weren't supposed to be released, but they're out. So now, hey, it's too late now. They're out here.
Yep.
So this is what we're looking at. These objects did go into basically airspace, which is off of California, also off of like Virginia, North Carolina, down that region, that was designed for also military operations area. These are where the encounters happened at. And these objects were going from 80,000 feet down to 20,000 feet at hypersonic speeds, which puts them over 5,000-6,000 miles an hour. So now the next question is, whose are they? The U.S. government, China, Russia, all the governments are testing hypersonic vehicles. I don't know if you saw the other day where they had the rocket sled.
I seen
like
something. Yeah, I seen something on TV about that.
Did you see the video of it though?
Yeah, I mean it just. I think what was it, 7,000 miles an hour?
Yeah, 6,000 plus miles an hour. So you think of like the old rocket sleds that they used for basically preparing the astronauts years ago for like the Mercury programs and the other ones. You put them on a rocket sled, you hit the rockets, and they go down this track. Well, this was unmanned, but it went at 6,000 miles an hour. So you're going from a standing stop to 6,000 miles an hour, and it was like, here you see it, the next minute's completely gone, other than like a couple sparks jumping past. So the different governments are working on something of hypersonic technologies. In this case, they were testing stuff on the ground, but they've also been reportedly testing stuff off the coast of California. So we don't know if it's ours or theirs.
Or aliens?
That is correct. Or them, because that gets us off into other regions where, if you think about it, we've talked about the exoplanets before. One of the theories is, what if they're coming from another star system? Well, there's 4,000 roughly now confirmed planets in other systems. And there's a new telescope going to be going online in a couple of years called the James Webb Telescope, which is like Hubble, and when you had Kepler, they're not that far from Earth. They launched those. They basically look at a very narrow window in space, and when they're observing stars, they look to see if a shadow passes in front of the star, or I should say really a silhouette. They see a silhouette, passing in front of it, which would potentially identify a planet moving in front of the star. And they keep tracking it to see if there's like regular patterns. Well, they've confirmed 4,000 such of those type of situations as being planets. And if you think about these telescopes, it's like, best approximation I can give is hold your hand up at arm's length and kind of like roll your index finger around and kind of like make a hole to look through. That's basically like what Kepler was doing. And Hubble, you're looking at this little tiny area. This new James Webb telescope can look at a very vast area. So I think those numbers of 4,000 are go through the roof once that gets launched. And it's going to also have a location going off the top of my head about 600 and some thousand miles from Earth once it's in position.
Really?
Yeah, it's going to be almost 3 times the distance from the Earth to the Moon, away from the Earth.
Wow. So it's not located here on the Earth?
No, it's not going to be located on the Earth. It's going to be out in space. And also it uses like these large shades to block light. So it can kind of isolate, almost like shading an area of your hands, just to kind of look through.
Right.
To get a better look at these little small areas. So that's going to be going online. So, here we've got the potential life in outer space.
Okay, I got a question from Kat in the chat room, and she wanted to know, did those Tic Tacs actually appear to have sort of bent legs under them as they do in some of the videos out there, or were those just the doctored ones?
Yeah, they might have been more like either doctored or artifacts, maybe. The videos I've looked at really just had more like, it wasn't like I guess you could say like little legs coming down below them. It was just really more like a projection off the side.
Like maybe
and you cannot make out any real distinct wings or anything like that.
Oh. And she said something about even though they broke the sound barrier speed-wise, there was no sonic boom?
No. There was no mention of any sonic boom. And that's another question, why not? Since we're used to something traveling,
once it breaks the sound barrier, there should be something that it crosses over.
There should be something. There should be something.
Unless there's a design in the rocket that keeps that from happening.
Yeah, and I've talked this over some of my friends too, that about, potentially what if you have a craft that can basically almost like break the environment in front of them, like in this case, like the atmosphere, like creating a hole in the atmosphere. So it's just almost like going down a tunnel with no resistance. No resistance from wind, atmosphere, any effects that would create friction. And again, this was just theorizing. That could this happen or not? Again, we don't know. We just conjecture, Almost like when you hear about what they call USOs, which is submersible objects, unidentified. With this Nimitz case, they also reported objects moving at extremely fast speeds underwater. Well, one of the thoughts I've had, I brought up the same thing of a friend of mine who's done a lot of submarine research, would be what if you have something that basically creates like a tunnel through the water? In a sense, it doesn't have the resistance of the water against it. There is no resistance there. So it can travel much faster. And again, we're just theorizing.
Wow.
Yeah.
Excuse me. Let's see here. She said physics as we know it would demand that there be sonic boom. Should have been huge waves if they entered the water at those speeds, like we would, but there wasn't any splashes or anything.
No, there was no splashes in there, and this goes back to why I was talking to my friends about what if you had this object as it goes into the water, it basically creates almost, I guess you could say, like a tunnel for this thing to enter into. So it's almost creating, an opening as it goes through. So there is no resistance of water that caused the splash rain coming out. And that could maybe account for the high speeds they can travel at, because there were some of the reports going off the top of my head of roughly about 60 plus miles an hour underwater of some of these objects.
So if they hit the water at a specific angle, could it be like, instead of skimming and like a rock going across it, but if it hit it just right, it shouldn't make any waves or splash, depending on the shape of the craft?
Had to mute my mic there a second.
Oh.
The alien dog is in the background. Yeah, it shouldn't make any difference, depending on the angle. And if you think about it, on one hand, if it comes in too vertical, it's just going to be basically impacting. And as we know, that pressure may be too great and destroy like a craft like we're familiar with.
Right.
On the other hand, it's going to skip off, like you say, like a rock skipping off of water. The same thing would be true with, let's say, like a craft re-entering the atmosphere of the Earth. Too low of an angle, it's going to skip right off. Too high, it's eventually going to burn right up.
Right. But if it's angled just right, it would be like just sliding right into the water.
Right. But you'd still have to have, like in this case, a splash effect of some sort. There'd still have to be something there.
Unless a craft is designed some way or another.
That's it. Unless there's some design into it that, it's breaking that water ahead of it, creating an opening.
Right. That would probably work.
Now, one thing I saw today, too, which was interesting, was some of the physicists now, like Michelle Kaku, coming out and saying, in the past, we had to prove that the government was hiding stuff and not telling us stuff. Now he came out and said that really it's on the other foot now. They've got to prove to us that something doesn't exist because of these things like the videos coming out now of the Nimitz, and they're coming out talking about these events, that they don't know what these things are, and that they're tracking things at these high velocities. They're tracking things moving at making extreme angular turns. The thing in the scientific community said they have to do, though, is they've got to find some way to duplicate these same motions to really prove stuff. But he's looking at the fact that the government now has got to prove that, they don't exist.
Well, plus you've got the pilots who was actually flying the planes that was tracking these things.
That's right. You've got the pilots now coming out saying that, hey, we don't know what these things were, and they were making extreme turns. So now you've got witnesses. You've also got radar that was tracking these same objects. So not only do you have the pilot reports, you also have radar documentation.
Are some of those pilots still active pilots, or all these that's come out and said things has been pilots that's retired?
The main ones that initially came out, the main pilot is retired. One of the other pilots has not talked about it publicly. It's a female pilot that was his wingman. She is not a pilot, but she's actually on inactive duty yet, in a higher level now than what she was, since it's been 15 years since the event, basically. One of the other pilots may still be in active duty, to my knowledge. And what the Navy's also done is they're changing their guidelines. Earlier this year, they announced they were changing guidelines, trying to make it easier for pilots to turn in reports, basically without ridicule. They want this information coming in because it appears that, like after an announcement a couple of days ago, they don't know what they're looking at. So they want to try to get as much information as possible from various military personnel. So the guidelines, I haven't seen an exact written documentation of what they're doing, but the intent is we want to make it easier for personnel to turn reports in without basically ridicule.
So is that putting it out there to the public, but in secret? If you open your mouth, you're canned?
Yeah. Well, I think what they're really trying to say is, hey, if you want to talk about it, talk about it. Now, it doesn't mean, Henry, that if they get people turning reports in, that it's going to go public.
Right.
It may just go into the mysterious agency or whoever it is inside of the military who says, okay, we're going to get your reports, we're going to look at them, but it's not going to go public necessarily.
Does that sound like another organization?
Well, the agency that was called ATIP, the Advanced Aerial Threat Identification Program, was the one that Luis Elizondo ran, or at least he claims he ran. Again, there's arguments pro and con for this, too. Arguments, some say that, no, he didn't truly run it. Other ones said, yes, he did. So it's almost like he said, she said again,
Right.
But the thing is, some of the pilots, one of the pilots like Fravor said, yeah, I did talk to people from an agency about this. So he said, yeah, I was interviewed after this whole thing, so it's very likely that either this agency or, like you say, an agency under a different name but basically doing the same thing is going to be going out and talking to these personnel or calling them in to talk to the personnel to get everybody the information they can about these encounters.
But then it would be hush-hush.
Very likely.
Mm-hmm.
And I could see that they may put a cap on it, especially since these videos that came out through Two to Stars Academy, they're now saying, well, they weren't really designed for public use. So they may tighten that up even more.
Wow. Let's see here. Yeah, we'll go a little bit longer here before we do any kind of a break. I had a question with Elizondo, and you answered it a little bit. I was wondering what did he actually do? in the government. And did he quit, or was he kind of like let go?
Well, he claims that he ran the agency called Advanced Aerial Threat Identification Program, or whatever name it was under. He says, no, I ran the program. That was my job. That he basically handled everything, or coordinated everything that went on in the agency. Now, that's where some of the questions are at, because the documentation proving, like a paper trail, that he was there. Now, he did say that he also stepped down because he was becoming frustrated. He thought information should be coming out that wasn't coming out. And that was why he said he decided to basically move on and go his own direction.
And you mean coming out as to the public?
Or leaving the agency, and he didn't necessarily at that time say, I'm going to a private group, but he left the agency for that reason. But it wasn't long after that, that's when he took up a To the Stars Academy. It almost seemed like somebody who had the intent that once they leave, this is the way I'm going. Because he also had connections that were within the government, other government personnel that left, that he most likely had contact with. Now, the big question mark is, what their intent is, because To the Stars Academy is a group that Tom DeLonge put together, and they want to really kind of focus on a number of things. They say, on one hand, we want to take and see what technologies we can basically uncover, see if we can reverse engineer some of those technologies. On the other hand, they're saying, well, we also are involved in media. We want to produce movies. We want to produce this and produce that to kind of like welcome or improve public awareness. And sometimes when you look at it, they're kind of scattered all over. What is your real intent? They also were fundraising money on their website. They had an initial goal of, I believe it was $50 million, which it fell well short of. It's like, okay, now how fast are you going through this funding? And the way I understand, they were going to have another fundraising drive to try to raise money, because their media things that they're putting out is only producing so much revenue, and I guess that's what's producing the most. So it's just told me a real big gray area about that organization. What's their real intent? What are they doing? And going back to Elizondo, when I talked to him or heard him talk, he was saying these were my duties, but again, it was very, very, I guess you could say maybe a little bit vague, maybe protective of saying, like in too broad of a stroke, what he really did. Like he may say, I'm involved with UFOs, but did it really truly mean UFOs like aliens, or did it just mean really unidentified aerial phenomena, which could be military, could be another government, could be anything else other than aliens?
Right. And then I assume that he probably wasn't really allowed to say too much, but then how much in depth was he actually secretive into, you might say?
Right. When I heard him, he was kind of guarded on what he talked about, and he would definitely come out and say, I can't talk about this because this could be going back to national security. But I've noticed at times when something in the news comes out, that he takes like another step farther if that line is kind of extended out. Like, okay, they establish a new boundary, so I can go a little bit farther out with what I can talk about because this other information is now public knowledge. But in the last, I don't know how long, it seems like he's been a little bit more quiet now.
Yeah, which was my next question was, what actually is he into now? What organization and what is he looking at or looking for?
Yeah, he's supposedly now, again, I just say supposedly because what in depth I don't know, with To the Stars Academy, because when these guys went to the Stars Academy, he's there. Hal Puthoff is like on their board of directors. There's a number of other individuals on their board of directors. I'm like, okay, are these people actually getting like a paycheck, or are they coming out saying we're going to give you so much stock in the company for your participation? But the way I understand it, like these monies involved that they're raising for stock, it's not like a stock like you could trade on Wall Street. You're basically investing into an organization that's going to be doing like research for the public's benefit. So that money may be gone basically once you invest it, I think. Because it just may be allowed to be spent. Now the speculation is, okay, what if they do find something? What if they do uncover something that's unique? Let's say some metals, some materials potentially from another craft. Then maybe that's where these investments these guys have could really pay off. So let's say, for example, and again, I'm just speculating here. I don't like to speculate, but I will tonight. What if Elizondo is getting X number of shares of stock in the organization as part of his participation? The same of some of these other individuals. It doesn't look like much now, but if they find an artifact, it could be worth a tremendous amount of money.
So, where is To the Stars? Where is their place located?
So was that California? I'm going. You caught me on that one, Henry. I want to think California.
Okay.
And they had this like small office set up at one time that almost looked like a small store that they were using as their business front, basically. But I'm pretty sure that is where it's from.
So who is it that has the Skinwalker Ranch?
Okay, now initially that was a private individual. Then Robert Bigelow, who owns Bigelow Aerospace, bought it. He had it for a number of years, but now it shows it's under a different individual's name, but I'm not saying it still doesn't go back to Robert Bigelow under a different organization's name.
Mm-hmm.
And that Skinwalker Ranch is where reportedly they'd had a lot of paranormal activities at. And that's where a lot of stuff came from, because the government, before they ran the program under this name of Advanced Aerial Threat, they had it under a different name. It was looking into the paranormal. And I think part of that might have gone back to maybe some connections with Bigelow and how they're getting things rolling. But then when people started seeing this other connection, and it wasn't just UFOs, but there's almost connections of paranormal and demons and so forth. They're like, do we want people to know that the government's looking for demons? You know.
Well, the Nazis did that in World War II.
Well, sure they did, but that's why they kind of got away and changed the name and went to Advanced Aerial Threat then. But you're right, the Nazis did that. I mean, Hitler was very, very big into the paranormal and the occult. I love watching the shows along those lines just to see what they were really looking at.
Right.
Going for. I mean, some of those are great shows.
Let's see here. Is To the Stars associated with Bigelow?
You know, I'm not sure if it's a direct connection, but some of the individuals who are with To the Stars Academy were with Bigelow's National Institute of Discovery Science originally, going back in the 1990s. So I wonder if there's not I don't know if it'd say, let's say I scratch your back, you scratch my back situation, where let's say, for example, if To the Stars Academy were to come across, let's say, some artifacts, they may not have the direct resources to do analysis on them. But what if they happen to drop a line to Robert Bigelow saying, could you look at these artifacts and analyze these materials? Could you do that? There still may be a connection there. And I don't know if he's a investor or not. He could potentially be an investor, or, an investor under a different name. But I would not say that connection does not exist. by any means. I think it still does.
So do you think they are actually looking for alien-type spacecraft, or are they looking at craft that we can build to use in space?
I think they'd be looking at both. Because if you think about it, if they can find something that's, like, say, terrestrial that we don't have, they can attain some of those artifacts. And maybe, what if they find some materials that are very unique that we don't have potentially in manufacture? That could be an advantage to an organization like a Bigelow or somebody like that, or going back to the government. I mean, I always wonder why he's got such a good connection, because years ago, if you brought up UFOs and aliens, that was like a taboo subject with the government. Yet here's a guy who's got an alien on the outside of his building, Henry, and he's come out in 60 Minutes and said, hey, they exist, period. UFOs, aliens exist, period. You're not going to change my mind. So he's very upfront about that, and I'm like, but yet he can make those comments, but yet he still gets government contracts and has this connection.
I still think that the government's got to be in contact somewhere or another with aliens.
It really makes you wonder that there's got to be some connection there somehow.
Mm-hmm.
Some contact.
All right. I think we've only been on for an hour, so I think what we should do is take us a quick break. Remember, your mic is live. It won't be, but, I mean, you could just mute your mic until we get back on. It's only going to be a few minutes. I'm not going to do a real long break, and then we'll come back on and do some more research, you might say. So, with that, Barbara's not here to take us out, so I guess I get to do that. So, everybody just stay tuned, and we'll be right back. So, just a couple of minutes.
ParaX Radio, programming for the open mind.
And welcome, everybody, right back here to the Paranormal View on the ParaX Radio Network. I want to thank everybody for being with us tonight. Those in the chat room, those listening from around the world, we appreciate each and every one of you. I understand, I guess, Barbara's having some kind of technical difficulties, and that's why she's not with us tonight. So hopefully she will be back sometime, maybe tonight, or if not next week. But we do still have with us Mr. Thomas Wertman.
I'm still here. I'm just getting the mic adjusted. I'm not going to scare you like that, Henry.
I know. But great show going on. And I want to remind everybody, if you do have questions tonight, you can private chat them to H. Foister, and we will get Thomas in on them. So we've talked about all kinds of other things. Now let's look at something else. I know you have went through different things, and you feel that you are an abductee and you've been abducted by aliens. Have you ever seen a UFO?
Yes, actually I have, Henry. Twice. That I can say distinctly I saw something, and potentially a third time. The first time was back roughly about mid to late 1960s. At an approximate guess, the closest I can come up is probably about 1967, 68. And that was when I saw I wouldn't say necessarily dish-shaped craft like you think of like a saucer shape, but it was almost more like a elongated egg shape, hovering about treetop height. And when I say treetop height, that was treetop height above me. That I distinctly remember. I mean, here's this silver, like squashed egg type thing, just hovering above the trees, just kind of like rocking back and forth very, very slowly. And as I'm walking through the woods, I see this thing distinctly right above me. And at the time I see it, I'm watching it. I have a buddy in front of me, maybe about 10 feet. I don't say anything to him about it at all. We just keep walking in unison through the woods because he was freaking out because he was getting scared on one hand because he didn't hear anything back in the woods. It was completely silent, no animal life of any sort, like squirrels, anything like that. There was also, he was telling me about this story about what he called a swamp willie, which is kind of like a Bigfoot creature existing back in the area, which I thought he was kind of like pulling like a campfire story. But he really started freaking out and running out of the woods. And that's where he mentioned about seeing the large white owl that was standing in front of us. The large white owl, which I don't remember seeing at all. And he said basically it was like a large, like 4 foot tall white owl just standing there watching us. And I remember absolutely nothing of that at all. And I still this day can't get out of my mind that silver disc-shaped object just hovering above the treetops. That was the first major one I saw. There was another smaller one that really could potentially be explained away as being aircraft, satellites, etc. The second one went back to right around, had to be right around 2003, 2005, something like that. I was driving down a turnpike, and I happened to look out the driver's side window just after dusk, and I could see a large triangular-shaped object. And when I mean large, it was like football-sized large.
Wow.
Yeah. If you were to take and basically, to give your audience kind of a perception, if I took my fist out and held it at arm's length, it was bigger than my fist. This object was this dark black triangular-shaped craft. And it was just moving slowly across the sky like it had no care at all, going from like the driver's side window, passing directly over my car towards the passenger's window. And when I saw it, I initially thought it was really kind of like a reflection off the window, because, I mean, it could be maybe something inside the car reflecting off the window. So I rolled my window down, and when I rolled it down, I could still see the object. I also had a sunroof in the car that I kicked back, and the sunroof, I could see this passing directly over my car like it had no care in the world. And it was a distinct razor-sharp triangle. And I saw nowhere, anywhere the following day or following days of any reports along those lines of anybody seeing anything like that.
And was it over, I mean, were you in the city, out in the country, where there wasn't much traffic or anything?
I was about, probably about 15 miles outside the city, outside of Cleveland, south of Cleveland. And there's an area called Peninsula that's like a state park that kind of runs south from there. That's, I wouldn't say it's super rural, but it's a little bit more, less populated area. But no reports from anybody. There are absolutely no lights on it. And it was about 5 years ago, I was talking to some friends of mine in a astronomy group. And our astronomy group has a very large telescope here in Ohio. And I'm going to be speaking there next weekend for their star party. And they're ones that sometimes you got individuals who say, yeah, there may be something in outer space, there may be something out there. And you've got other ones who are like, yeah, right. Put on your tinfoil hat, You've got both avenues, but they're still very respectful people of both opinions. And I did my first talk there like 7 years ago now. And after the talk, I had 3 different people come up, completely separate from each other, saying that they'd seen a similar black triangle to what I'd seen out sky watching. And they were just sky watching with binoculars, laying back in lawn chairs, no telescopes or anything like that. And they just couldn't believe what they saw. But it matched my description. The the same large black triangle, no lights, just moving slowly across the sky.
And there's no way that could have been some sort of a blimp?
Well, I'm very familiar with that because I used to live about 15 miles from Goodyear, the blimp dock.
Right.
And we would have the blimps coming over all the time. And to begin with, the blimps produce a very distinct noise if you've heard them.
It's a hum.
It's a hum. And actually the newer one is made by Zeppelin now and has a different sound to it. But there was no sound whatsoever from this object. None. The other individuals who reported seeing triangles, same thing. No sound whatsoever. It was just passing slowly over. Also, the blimp, the connections I have now, and I didn't at that time, I can actually contact Goodyear, and there's a lot of other agencies that fly them too, but Goodyear will let me know if they were in the region at that time. But the Goodyear blimp has also distinctive lighting on it, and not just the banners, but other lights illuminating it. But no, it was not a blimp. I can guarantee you that.
Wow. So then that's a UFO that you actually seen. But there wasn't any reports.
At least I can't say it wasn't government or whatever, but I have no clue what it was, and it didn't match anything I'm familiar with.
And how long ago was this?
That one had to be right around 2004, roughly. Is when I saw that one.
So you was already was you in MUFON by then?
No, that was right before I got into MUFON. That was several years before.
So what was the thing that cast you over into MUFON?
Well, it's that lifelong interest. Back in when I was in grade school, we always had the book clubs that you could buy, like the paperback books every month. And I liked to read at that time. Not so much now, but I liked to read it at that time. And I remember my mom gave me like $1 a month to spend on books, which you could buy at that time 2 or 3 paperbacks for $1. And one of the first books I bought, Henry, was on UFOs. And I read this book over called Flying Saucer Serious Business. And I remembered making notes in the margin about some of the different cases that I read about in there. And I'm reading this case over, like one was like about a Thomas Mantell, who was a pilot in like the Air Force Reserves. And he was flying down around the Kentucky region when a UFO was spotted out by one of the airports. And he, along with a couple other aircraft, were sent out to investigate. And as they see the object, he sees it's above him. He starts climbing. And eventually what happens is the other 2 aircraft turn back because they're low on fuel. Also, they didn't have oxygen. They shouldn't have been going that high. But he pursued the object up to about 20,000 feet. And they lost communication with him, and he crashed and perished. And the reports came out and said that basically he was chasing a weather balloon. That was the old explanation all the time.
Oh, yeah.
Chasing a weather balloon. That's what it had to be. And it seemed like there was really loose documentation on when these weather balloons were being launched and followed up on. Well, it just kind of opened that avenue along with some other stories they had in that book about interest in UFOs that really got me hooked. So I started buying other books. Some of them were way out in left field, put it this way. I didn't make any notes in the margins about what I thought about these stories. Some of them were pretty laughable. But, you know, the embarrassing part is you had also people who believed those individuals. One individual's name was George Abdansky, who had books written, I think you really could say, for him, almost like ghostwriting. And the stories are really unbelievable about going to other planets, meeting aliens on other planets in our solar system, which was not plausible. But you had, and you still do have, people buying into some of those stories. So that kind of really kick-started that interest. And then I got away from it for a number of years, but back when I hit midlife crisis age, as I call it, once I hit my early 50s, I thought, I want to do something that I'm really interested in. I'd gone through a divorce at the time. And I thought, what am I interested in? I always loved science fiction and science in general. So that's when I kind of reached out. I was actually listening to a podcast from another show. It was actually Art Bell's show, going back a number of years. And Art Bell, I thought, was a great broadcaster who got into the paranormal. And I heard some shows on UFOs. I thought, hey, I had to kind of get into this stuff. Well, I Googled UFO in the region I live in. I found a group that met close to my house, and it was kind of like karma. They met the same weekend I founded their website. I joined up with them. I was with them for about 9, maybe almost 10 years before I left the group. And they fed the side of interest. And I was also able to meet a number of people involved in the field in ufology through them. The group had a very rich history. And at the same time, it wasn't feeding the investigation side, so that's when I got involved with MUFON to feed that investigation side, because MUFON does do the investigations and provided the other avenue. And that's where, since I've got involved with them, like the end of 2008, beginning 2009, it's extremely interesting, the people you meet in this field. And now I started branching out into some other groups of researchers who are very hardcore, that have mammoth collections of material. And I feel like I'm in the infant stage sometimes when I hear them talk about some of these cases and the information they've got. It's just amazing, the research they've done over all the years.
So at what point, I guess once you joined MUFON, at what point did you start thinking about that you had been abducted?
That had to be about 5 or 6 years, and I really didn't really know what to make of it, Henry. I'd had some memories in the back of my mind of things that happened. I remembered seeing the object, but it's like something that I remember seeing it, but I didn't put a tremendous amount of interest in it, like a passion to really pursue it. Once I got involved in the MUFON side, then I started thinking, maybe there's a little bit more to the story than what I know about on the outside. Maybe there's some repressed memories, and that's where I got talked into doing some regressions with an individual who did 3 separate regressions. And I was kind of shocked what came out on the first regression. When we did the first one, I went to the individual's house, and we went back to the most powerful memories I had, which is when I lived in South Carolina. Because I'd had bouts at that time of sleep paralysis, where I remember laying in bed, Henry, when I was probably right around 12, 13 years old and couldn't move, and it wasn't the first time I'd had them. I'd had sleep paralysis bouts for maybe about 4 or 5 years, and they can happen to anybody, not necessarily related to abduction, but it was the type where I remembered basically not being able to move, feeling like I was being levitated out of the room. And not just being levitated out of the room, but what also was arising is paranoias. Paranoias that something was coming for me almost on a nightly basis. And I couldn't stop it no matter what I did. I even remember, and I was thinking about this not too long ago, Henry. I said, I remember going through a stage where the paranoia was getting so strong I'm thinking, I've got to protect myself somehow because they're coming again. They're coming again. It's coming again, whatever it is, you know. And I remember, somehow I got this thought about it, trying to develop my mind strong enough to create like a protective shield. Now, it sounds crazy, you know, but a protective shield around me that nothing could get to me. It couldn't penetrate that shield. And I remembered almost every night trying to manifest, just say the word manifest, this shield around me, that nothing could get to me. I also remembered checking the inside of the room, and somebody may say, yeah, it could be those childhood memories, just paranoia as any child may have, you know, fear of the dark, fear at night. But I kept looking for something. I kept searching for something that was coming for me.
Now, was this after you'd been abducted the first time, or you didn't even realize you had been abducted?
Well, this was just at this time when we did the regression. This was not the first time it had happened. There had been other times before that. This just happened to be one that we decided would it be a good one to kind of go from, because we were discussing some of the memories I had from this time frame. And we thought, okay, let's just use this as a starting point. It was also the time frame when that silver disc object I'd seen, right around that same time frame. It was also where like these extreme paranoias really started developing, that something was taking me, not just taking me, but I'm not saying medically examine me, but something was taking me to kind of like almost like evaluate me, look at me, research me. And what happened during that session was when I'd gone up, I'd not only gone through like basically the ceiling of the room, but I ended up in kind of like a domed shaped room that was like a gray color that had like, you just kind of looked off in the distance. You couldn't really see any distinct edges going off in the distance. The only thing I could see is see a figure off in the distance that appeared to be non-human. And then up close to me, initially on one side, I remembered seeing another being that was non-human that goes back to a figure similar to the Greys. And it was looking at me at very close distance, and I just remembered seeing these large black eyes that appeared to go like no emotion, you know, you just didn't know what to make of it. And that is what really, Henry, started jump-starting after that regression. This intensified this passion for research to the point that I would start researching cases, start getting into cases. There were some I would have almost immediate connection with the witnesses. Like somehow we're like connected mentally. That I could basically almost like finish a sentence that they'd started. But there are other witnesses I'd talked to that I felt like I was getting out the BS meter. And the BS meter was saying, BS. They didn't see anything. They wish they'd seen something.
I'm pretty sure that you could probably connect with them like that and understand that they wasn't telling the truth.
Yeah, and it was immediate. And it would really, actually, Henry, get me to the point that I would start getting PO'd. That, like, I don't want to hear any more of your BS, because that's all it is BS. There's nothing to what you're talking about. And it's because I didn't feel that connection. It's almost like the ones who had true sightings or true, especially close experiences, were the ones I could relate to almost immediately. Like there was a connection somehow. So it intensified. We did, on the first regression, it went about an hour and a half. And I remembered when we were done, the person who did the regression, she looked at me and she says, I have never had so much stuff come out on a first regression in my life. She goes, I just can't believe it, what came out. It was just like it kept rolling right off my tongue the whole time. So after that point,
did she tape this?
I did.
You did.
I brought a recorder with me, and I recorded it. And I don't even want to listen to it myself. I listened to it once, but I don't know if you've got the same feelings I do sometimes. I see myself, if I do like an interview on TV, I don't want to watch it. I don't know why.
That's me.
yeah. But at times you don't want to watch it. Even when I do my own podcast, it's like, okay, did it, none it, okay, move on. I don't want to hear myself for whatever reason. And it goes back to when we did the regression, I listened to it once, and the main reason I listened to it was she leading me? Was she planting seeds in my mind of everything that she wanted me to talk about? And there was nothing like that. All she basically did is take me to a given time, take me to a given point, and just let me roll. And that's when everything just started coming right off the top of my tongue, just very, very natural. So we did the first one. I waited a while before I did the second one. And we went to a different time frame when we did the second one. You brought up about the fact of, like when we did this regression, was it the first one? First experience? No, we actually went back farther. The first experience I had went back into the early 1960s, where I had to be, if anything, maybe around 9 or 10 years old, something like that.
Really? That young?
Yeah, that young. And what we did is, I used to go out to my grandmother's on occasion. She lived out in a rural area. The family had owned a farm. It was her mother's farm, and I don't know how many years that whole area had been in the family. Her brother owned a lot of farmland behind, so did she. And when he went out there, they had no indoor bathrooms. So in January, it was a unique experience if you went out to go to the bathroom, to the outhouse.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, they had a faucet inside, then they had water for basically for like doing laundry in their basement. Other than that, it was a one-bedroom old farmhouse with a tin roof. And she would say, hey, do you want to go fishing this weekend? Okay, yeah, I'll go fishing. Well, to go fishing, she had to be out when sunrise hit. She wanted to be out there if her pole dropped in the water. So I had to stay the night before. And it was on one of these given trips that I had the first memories of something coming for me. And I remembered something coming from a given direction. It was just like, something's coming. So I'd get up, I'd look out the windows. You couldn't see anything. They had like one security light is all they had. And I remembered like looking off in the cornfields, and it was, again, somebody say it's that child paranoia, but I felt something was coming from that area. Another area was from a wooded area behind their house. I remembered seeing or feeling something was coming from that wooded area. Again, I didn't see anything distinctly, but it left such an impression that something happened on that night. We went back to that same region, and that was where on one of the times I was out there was actually during the day. I remembered going out into the woods behind her house, just kind of exploring because there was nothing else to do out there. Going back in the woods, as I'm walking through the woods, I heard these shuffling of like footsteps coming behind me. And I'm like, okay, what's coming behind me? Who's coming from behind me? Is it an animal? Is it a human? Whatever. But something would not allow me to turn my head, Henry. I could not turn my head to look at it. So I thought, okay, I hear this thing coming on my right-hand side. So it's on my right-hand side. Let's go to my left to get farther away from it. As I'm going to my left, next thing you know, I hear the rustling right behind me on my left-hand side, so I start going back to the right. So I keep like going back and forth through the woods, and I eventually start trying to get out of the woods, and I pop out into this clearing that takes me down into a dip in all the fields that they had out there, and there's this little small pond. And I couldn't pick up anything distinctly that happened there in the talk, but I felt something happened in the region where that pond was at. I don't remember anything, after I got out there. Interesting enough, I was talking to my sister years later, matter of fact, only a few years ago, and she knows about my experiences now. She didn't back then, but we've talked in the last 5 years about all this stuff. And she goes, when I was out at Grandma's, that pond always scared the crap out of me. And she's the one who brought the pond up. And of all areas to be afraid of, it was the same area where I was at. Now, wait a minute. Here's this unusual connection. Why would she mention this? Why would she bring this up? But she doesn't remember anything herself of having her own experiences. But that was the first ones that I ever had in that region. And then it appears to be they connected and became much stronger once I moved to South Carolina. And also I developed a lot of medical problems, all nerve-related, nervous conditions and everything else, that they had me on all sorts of medications because of ulcers I developed back then. And they never could explain why I developed ulcers that bad at such a young age.
So would you end up like not seeing them come to get you or remembering that, but you would remember waking up on or wherever it was where the beings had took you to?
Yeah, I'd remember basically things leading up to it, and then after it was over and done with. That was it. There was almost like nothing in between until the regressions came, and the regressions were kind of filling in the dots, connecting the dots and lines together. And, I'd always wondered, have things been ongoing since then? And what after effects have there been after all these events? Well, in one of the events back when I lived in South Carolina, I had memories that somehow it connected to this entity. There was somehow a connection that I could see everything in its mind. Like it was looking at me, kind of evaluating me mentally, almost like reading my mind, and all of a sudden, boom, here, this connection opened up. I could now see everything in its mind. And it kind of opened up this vast universe that I wasn't supposed to see. And I had the feeling, and this is what came out in the regressions, that it was trying to shut me down no matter what it could, but it couldn't do it. It couldn't stop it. And maybe that was also why there were so many other experiences afterwards, because it was trying to make sure that this avenue was shut down, this connection. Now, but that's also something I believe that when I see these witnesses or I talk to certain witnesses, that my BS meter comes out right away because it's still a connection that was never fully broken.
Now, is this the same ones through all this time that has, abducted you, or maybe different ones, different ships, or did they all look the same on the inside?
It all appeared to be the same, no different. It's almost like it's a continuation all this time.
Have you checked to see if you got some sort of an implant somewhere to where they can track you and know exactly where you're at?
I've never had them search for an implant. Now, I've had a lot of CAT scans in my life, and maybe if they found something, they just never said anything because of it wasn't what they were looking for exactly. But on the other hand, I've also worked in different fields where I know I probably have different pieces of metal in me that could potentially be confused with something like that. One of my friends did an analysis, I think it was about a year ago, something like that, of somebody who thought that they'd had an implant, and it appeared to be just a type of a carbon-based metal that wasn't anything in particular, but the individual didn't know how that piece of metal got in their hand. But it didn't appear to be anything extraterrestrial by any means. So I haven't looked at that. But the thing that sometimes pops up that, on one hand, Henry say, maybe this is just all my imagination, maybe I'm kind of making things up. On the other hand, things pop up that make you think otherwise. I remember one time, it was kind of wild, I was in a church doing a UFO lecture from the pulpit. I felt like the Antichrist almost standing up on the pulpit talking about UFOs. And this individual comes up to me right after the talk, and she goes, I've never seen such an odd aura around a body in my life.
Really?
Yeah, she goes, you have the strangest colored aura. And she goes, you and one other person in this whole room, and there's about 100 people in the room. She goes, you two do. And he's also somebody else who had a connection to potential abduction. Then there was another situation where a friend of mine said she was talking to one of her friends, a female that's claimed to be abducted. She said, yeah, she was on a craft not too long ago even. And she goes, she was talking about different people she saw on the craft, and she goes, one of the people sounded like you. And she put out like the lineup photos of not just me, but several other individuals, and I was the one who she picked out of the lineup as being the person she talked to.
Huh.
So it still may be ongoing for all I know. Why they want me now, I have no clue. I feel like the fish should be thrown back at this point,
Well,
but
do you think that they're still keeping track of you? I mean, you being with MUFON and researching UFOs, that they want to keep close tabs on you?
Yeah, it may be because not just a MUFON thing, but just keeping tabs, period. Because of maybe different people I make contact with within the field, different subjects I may be studying at a different time. Maybe I happen to get onto some subject that's really maybe something of interest to them, to see somebody's take on it, to see what information I'm digging up.
Yeah, maybe something is in the back of your mind that you'd seen with them or on the ship, and they want to track you to make sure that doesn't come out.
Exactly. There still may be that connection there that they want to make sure of. But this has been ongoing now for, 50-plus years. But I was hesitant to begin with to go through the regression just because of maybe it's like almost maybe like been there, done that. Maybe it happened, maybe it didn't. Life has moved on. But it was just something I was talked into because one of the groups I was in at that time was doing abduction research, and I thought, well, what better way to understand what somebody who's been through these experiences have been, but go through it myself, like the regressions and so forth.
Do you think one of them could maybe be invisible? I mean, like if they wanted to secretly be in different places like the White House, the Pentagon, or wherever, to see exactly what's going on and what people knows?
Good question about the invisibility. I hadn't really thought about the invisibility part, Henry. That's a good question. I'm not sure if necessarily invisible, but maybe it's able to blend in such a way.
Yeah, look like human.
Look like human, because I have had some talks I've done over the years. There's been some extremely unique-looking individuals that showed up. One talk I did in particular was at a library in a small community. We had like 40 people jammed in this tiny little room. That was almost like no bigger than a classroom at a small school, 40 to 50 people. And there was 3 to 4 individuals that looked like they were albinos. But the thing that they did is they all moved in unison, which was really creepy. And they were doing it without prompting. They would all turn and look the same direction at the same time. Their body motions were all similar at the same time. And it made me wonder, are these individuals human? And when I talked to some other individuals who had been there at that talk, I didn't prompt them on it, but I said, you notice anything unusual about the talk today? And they said, yeah, there were some people over there kind of looked like albinos that really stood out as far as difference from everybody else. They didn't necessarily think they were, let's say, alien, but they just noticed how different they were from everybody there. So maybe it's possible that, that there are individuals who are blending in much better than these did, but blending in with like the general population.
And do you think that with their spaceship, they could also have a cloaking type device to where it could be not noticed very easily?
Mm-hmm. Well, it's possible. Now, I mean, if you think about it, we're developing technologies ourselves with those abilities, where they're basically able to almost like have the Henry Potter invisibility cape. So I think it's possible. Number one, I think, that they've got the capability, if they wanted to take and do stealth, that we couldn't necessarily pick them up on radar. And it's only our most advanced radar systems which seem to be picking these objects up. As far as invisibility goes, is it invisibility, or is it, I don't want to use like a cop-out, but is it potentially interdimensional? That they're sliding into maybe another dimension. And they're really here at the same time.
That could also be a way that they can travel from far away real fast.
That's right. Because one of the things that's still being brought up this day is how do you get between point A and point B, these X number of light years away,
right?
In a lifespan. Like, I don't know if you saw it the other day, but there is a thing that popped up on the internet about one of the exoplanets that a professor in London is saying that the atmosphere looks like it contains water.
Right.
Water vapors. And that's like 110 light years away.
And they would end up having to have robots to actually get there. Humans couldn't do it.
Exactly.
Which it doesn't do us much good if we want to travel to another place.
That's right. Within our lifespan, definitely. But the thing is are they traveling here or is it robots? I mean, the entities, excuse me, Henry, the entities I had experience with seem to have no emotions. And maybe that could account for no emotions. But on the other hand, maybe with their development, they've lost emotions, or a large percentage of what our human emotions are like.
Yeah, that's when you stop and think, say, oh, we'd love to be able to travel, unless they've got something that bends time or does something to where they can go really, really fast. Us today cannot travel anywhere like that.
No.
And even just going out into space, like to the moon or to the space station, doesn't that affect our bodies and everything? Just doing that?
Just doing that, because you think about the radiation in space. They talk about traveling to, let's say, Mars, and the radiation that can be affecting the human body. The spaceships that they're traveling on to the moon and for that matter to Mars when they go are not really that thick. It's very thin metal. So just that radiation itself could affect something over time. And you're mentioning like the time frames. I found this interesting thing the other day of where they're saying that signals broadcast on Earth, where they would be at now in time and space. And I was really dating myself. I'm seeing all these TV shows that they mentioned But like let's see, I'm just scrolling and making it bigger so I can see it. But they said like the original Star Trek series being broadcast, the signals would have reached out to one of the stars called Zeta Reticuli, which is one of the stars that sometimes mentions where the gray aliens like are coming from. But our signals have reached that far. But you think about the original Star Trek goes back to like 1965, 66, right around that time frame.
Right.
So you're talking 50 years to get to that other star system. And that's just a TV signal traveling at base like the speed of light.
Oh, yeah. When they say that they're sending signals to different places, and they said they won't hear anything for 10, 12 years because it takes that long for it to get there and come back.
That's right. And then you think about something coming back, you're talking about like 100-year round trip just for that signal going out and coming back.
Right, right. And I'm not sure exactly how fast those signals travel, but they must travel a whole lot faster than what we have the capabilities of traveling now.
Exactly, they do. So, like you see, it's not going to happen in our lifespan.
No, not even riding that sled that goes 6,000 miles an hour.
That's right. You got that right.
Think of the fuel and the food and everything you got to carry on that thing. It's going to have to be a big ship.
Oh, I know. And I thought about some of these earlier broadcast shows. When they reach these other worlds, what are they going to think? I mean, they mentioned here like Gilligan's Island would be out by Capella. What are you going to think when you see Gilligan's Island or the Munsters?
Oh, yeah. Where you come from?
That's right. Why are they always picking on that little guy?
Yeah. Okay. You do some, dealing, I guess, with UFOs. There's some other things that you have done, different places that you've gone to. How much dealings have you had with Bigfoot?
Oh, let's see. Depends on how serious you look at it sometimes. I have done some things to Bigfoot. Actually, the area in South Carolina where I had the experience seeing the silver-shaped craft, that area was one that was reportedly rumored to have Bigfoot. And I thought my buddy was BSing me until I went to the Bigfoot Research Organization's website and found out, like, was it the 1980s, something like that? That exact road I was on had a Bigfoot sighting in that area. That somebody saw it from their house. Now, I haven't gone out to look for... Actually, I went with another group one night, and they were telling me the signs to look for Bigfoot. That Bigfoot leaves certain types of marks, like Bigfoot may be bending tree branches around certain ways at certain heights. Myself, I'm skeptical, maybe because, first of all, it was my first experience really going out and hunting Bigfoot. And they were telling me all these various explanations, but the part I look at, Henry, is I'm more from the scientific side. I have to look at these things saying, okay, you're telling me this tree branch is bent and broken a certain way as a directional marker. I'm inexperienced, number one, at really identifying that. I wish I had more experience tracking, but I don't. But I'm like, what else would cause this branch to be broken this particular way? Now, I would like to go out and do the Bigfoot hunting really out west in particular. There's some areas out in Oregon I'd love to go out and look at just to get the experience. Going back in the woods and maybe having somebody that has that scientific knowledge side really talking to me about these things and guiding me. That I would like to do. But the only experience I had was kind of very, very brief. And was very, very skeptical because some of the things they were coming up with.
Yeah. When you look at the Bigfoot thing, excuse me, the only proof that they've kind of come up with, they show Bigfoot tracks, and they show nests supposedly built. Do you think that could have been built by something else, though, a different type of animal?
Right. Because we did see some nests back in there. They said that this was built evidently by a Bigfoot. And I can't help but think, okay, maybe is this brush being knocked down and away by deer or something like that? I don't know. I'm not that experienced in that area. I wish I had more insight. The other thing I look at is when at times they bring out the evidence, like you say, they bring out the footprints. When I look at the footprints, I'm like, okay. First of all, how well defined are the footprints? Is this something that appears to be more like a solid footprint, or is it something that appears to be very, very vague? Where they're saying that this is a footprint, but you really can't make out the shapes until they pour in, let's say, plaster. And I just can't help but think on some of those, is it something else? Now, on the distinct ones, I mean, when you get some of the very distinct footprints, if they're not hoaxed, I wonder what caused them. Because, I mean, yeah, I have seen things where they said it's a barefoot, somebody barefoot, and let's say, exposure to, like, the environment, the weather and so forth made it look bigger. But when you go back to it, why would somebody be maybe walking barefoot in that area?
Right.
Also, when you look at it, okay, it's going to take a certain amount of weight to make that footprint go down into the soil.
Right.
I mean, it's an interesting field. I've got some friends that's really into it. But I haven't been the super investigator on that side, maybe because I was just limited physically the last few years, unable to do it.
Well, you have to figure that none of them has actually ever been found. And by that, I mean alive, dead, or anything to where you can actually have evidence and say, oh, here's a Bigfoot.
Yeah.
It's just like aliens.
Right.
So,
now, I do remember the sideshow in the circus the one time, the fair that came through that had the supposed Bigfoot body in the ice. Do you ever remember that one, Henry?
No, I don't remember that one.
This goes back to like the 60s, 70s, that there was supposed like the Bigfoot in a block of ice that the guy was touring around with.
Oh. How do you keep the ice from melting?
I suppose he had like this refrigeration. You had to keep it cold all the time.
Wow.
Yeah.
He'd be hurting if the electric went out.
That's for sure. That's
well, we're down to like 2 minutes. I want to thank you for being with us tonight. A lot of very interesting stuff, and I hope people has enjoyed the show. I have. And,
I hope so, too.
I'm sure that they have. Just, of course, you're probably going to be back on in another month or so anyhow, so a little over a month maybe. But I guess you might as well go ahead and tell people how they can follow you, because you do a show also, how they can listen to your show and get in contact or whatever if they'd like to.
Sure. If they want to listen to the show is called Ufodyssey. It's kind of like UFO and Odyssey combined together. And it's on odyssey1.com. If they want to catch us, they can also find us on Streaker, iHeartRadio, along with other various podcast areas. And if they want to get a hold of me, the best way to get a hold of me is my own personal email. That's MUFON, MUFON, .T.Wertman. My last name is WERTMAN @gmail.com, and they can reach me. The show, by the way, the radio show, the podcast is broadcast 5 times a week. I'm up to like 24 episodes now, Henry.
Wow.
I'm still on the air. How did that happen?
Well, you had practice.
And by the way, I'm getting a lot of requests also for talks, not just later this year, but next year already.
All right.
A lot of interest in this field.
Excellent. All right, our time has run right on out. I want to thank you and thank everybody for listening tonight. Next week we have with us Marie D. Jones talking about her book, Celebrity Ghosts and Notorious Hauntings. And it is a great book. I'm still reading on it. That's how much is in this book. So until then, this is Henry Foister, and I'm sure for Barbara and for Jeff, we will see you next week at the same time. So good night, everybody. You've been listening to the Paranormal View on the ParaX Radio Network. Join us again next week at the same time for more of the Paranormal View.